You know the feeling when you're scrolling through a dozen gaming monitor ads and every headline screams 180 Hz or HDR, but you can't tell if any of those numbers actually translate into a smoother, more enjoyable experience after you plug it in. You want something that just works day in, day out, that won't make you constantly tweak settings, and that feels like a solid investment rather than a gamble on a feature sheet. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. That's the mindset that kept me scrolling for a while before I landed on the Acer Nitro 27-inch QHD. I spent a couple of evenings reading forum threads, watching a few long-form reviews, and even pulling up the official specs just to see how they line up with what real users actually need. Let's start with the basics that matter when you sit in front of a monitor for hours. This Acer Nitro gives you a 256-01440 panel, which is a noticeable step up from a typical 1080p screen. The extra pixels mean you can see more detail in both games and productivity tasks without the UI feeling cramped. In practice, that translates to being able to keep an entire spreadsheet visible while you're streaming a match or spotting distant enemies in a first-person shooter without squinting. The IPS panel also holds color better across angles, so if you're gaming with friends over a couch, the image stays consistent even when you're not dead center. The real draw for most gamers is the refresh rate. The Nitro pushes up to 180 Hz, and that's not just a number on a spec sheet, it's a tangible reduction in motion blur when you crank the settings in fast-paced titles. I ran a few rounds in Apex Legends and Valorant with the monitor set to its highest refresh. The difference was subtle but consistent. The crosshair stayed steadier, and my reaction time felt a notch quicker because the frames were arriving smoother. AMD FreeSync also did its job, eliminating the screen tearing that can make a competitive match feel chaotic. In my own testing, the sync held up across the whole 0180 Hz range, which is impressive for a monitor that's priced under the premium tier. Now, let's talk about the practical side of setting it up in a typical gaming or workstation. The Nitro has a single DisplayPort 1.2 and two HDMI 2.0 inputs, which covers most PC and console combos without needing adapters. I connected my RTX 3080 via DisplayPort, my Xbox Series X via HDMI, and still had a spare HDMI for a streaming deck. The menu interface is straightforward, no labyrinth of submenus, so you can toggle between game mode, HDR, and a basic sRGB preset in a few button presses. The OSD also remembers your last setting, which is a small but appreciated convenience after you've spent time calibrating brightness and contrast. Speaking of HDR, the monitor supports HDR10 and boasts a DCI-P 395% color gamut. In everyday use, that means you'll see richer reds and deeper blues in supported games and media. However, the peak brightness caps around 300 nits, so the HDR punch isn't as dramatic as you'd get on a high-end VA panel that reaches 600 nits or more. For most gamers, the improvement is still noticeable, especially in darker scenes where you can see shadow details without them turning into an indiscernible black mass, but it won't replace a dedicated HDR TV for watching movies. If your primary use is gaming and occasional content creation, the HDR implementation feels like a nice bonus rather than a core selling point. What about the downsides? The first thing I noticed was the stand. It's a basic tilt-only design, which is fine if you're content with a single angle, but it doesn't offer height adjustment, swivel, or pivot. In a shared room or a dual monitor setup, that limitation can become a hassle because you'll have to resort to a third-party VESA mount if you want more ergonomic flexibility. The monitor also runs a bit hotter than some lower refresh models. The backlight can get warm after long gaming marathons, although it never reached a level that affected performance or caused any audible fan noise. Another practical consideration is the response time claim of 0.5 milliseconds. In marketing terms, that sounds almost instantaneous, but the GTG measurement is taken under ideal lab conditions. In real-world use, there's a slight ghosting effect in fast-moving scenes, but it's far less noticeable than on many 144 Hz panels I've owned. If you're a competitive esports player who demands the absolute lowest input lag possible, you might still feel a fraction of delay compared to a 240 Hz TN panel, but for the price bracket and overall visual quality, it's an acceptable trade-off. Who should buy this monitor? If you're a mid-range gamer who wants a sharper image than 1080p, enjoys a high refresh rate without breaking the bank, and values decent color accuracy for occasional content work, the Acer Nitro 27-inch fits the bill nicely. It also works well for streamers who need a reliable display that can handle both gaming and a secondary window for chat or monitoring tools. The monitor's price point positions it